I woke up to the sound of my doorbell ringing at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, which immediately put me in a foul mood because anyone who knows me understands I need my weekend sleep after dealing with permit applications and zoning disputes all week. I stumbled to the door in my bathrobe, coffee not even started yet, and opened it to find a blonde woman in her early 50s wearing a pressed blazer and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Mr. Richard Olsen?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew exactly who I was. "That's me," I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. I'm here to inform you that your deck is in violation of community standards and must be removed immediately." That woke me up faster than any coffee could have. "Excuse me," she gestured to my backyard with a sweep of her manicured hand. "Your deck was damaged in last month's snowstorm. It's been over 3 weeks, and you haven't repaired it. The HOA bylaws state that any structure showing visible damage must be repaired or removed within 14 days. You're now 9 days past that deadline." I stepped outside in my slippers, the cold February morning air biting at my ankles. The snow had finally melted enough to reveal the grass, though dirty piles still lined the edges of my property. My deck, which I'd built 5 years ago with my own hands and properly permitted through my own department, had taken some damage when a massive tree branch came down during that freak blizzard that hit Denver last month. 3 of the railings were smashed, and a corner of the decking had buckled under the weight of the branch and accumulated ice. "I'm aware of the damage," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I've been waiting for the ground to thaw enough for proper repairs." "You can't exactly replace deck footings when the ground is frozen solid." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not my concern. The rules are clear. You have 48 hours to begin removal or the HOA will take action." "Removal? I'm repairing it, not removing it." "The structure is beyond the scope of simple repairs, according to our Architectural Review Committee. Complete removal is required, after which you may submit plans for a new deck pending approval." I felt my jaw clench. I'm the director of the Building Permits Department for Denver County. "I think I know what constitutes beyond repair, and this isn't it." Her expression didn't change, though I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. "Your professional position doesn't exempt you from HOA regulations, Mr. Olsen. 48 hours. She turned and walked back to her white Mercedes SUV, leaving me standing in my bathrobe on my front steps, too angry to feel the cold anymore. I went inside and made that coffee I desperately needed, then pulled out my HOA documents from the filing cabinet in my home office. I'd bought this house 3 years ago, attracted by the good schools in the area for my daughter who lived with me half the time after the divorce, and the fact that it was only a 20-minute commute to my office downtown. The HOA had seemed reasonable enough at the time, mostly concerned with keeping lawns mowed and houses painted in approved colors. I paid my dues quarterly and never gave it much thought. Reading through the covenants now with fresh eyes, I found the section Patricia had referenced. Structures showing visible damage had to be addressed within 14 days. Fair enough. But there was nothing about removal being mandatory, and nothing that gave the Architectural Review Committee the authority to declare something beyond repair. That determination, legally speaking, required either a licensed structural engineer or the local building inspector, which in this jurisdiction fell under my department's purview. I spent the rest of Saturday morning making calls. First to Tom Richards, one of my senior inspectors, who agreed to come by Monday morning to do an official assessment. Then to my lawyer, Marcus Webb, who specialized in property law. His receptionist said he was out of town until Tuesday but would call me then. Finally, I called my contractor friend Steve Morrison, who'd helped me build the original deck. "Can you come take a look at my deck damage?" I asked, "and give me an estimate for repairs?" "Sure thing, Rich. I'm actually free this afternoon if that works." "Perfect. See you around 2." Steve showed up right on time, walking around the deck with a practiced eye, testing boards, examining the damaged sections. "This is totally fixable," he said after about 15 minutes. "You've got 3 railings to replace, maybe 8 or 10 boards here in the corner where the branch hit. The joists look fine, no structural damage. The footings are solid. I'd say $1,500 in materials, maybe 2 days of work. I can start Wednesday if you want." "Absolutely. Can you write up a formal estimate?" "Sure, but why formal? We've done plenty of handshake deals before." I explained about Patricia's visit that morning. Steve whistled low. "HOA, man. I swear, they attract the worst kind of power trippers. Yeah, I'll write it up official with my contractor's license number and everything. Email it to you tonight." After Steve left, I sat on my damaged deck despite the cold, looking out at my backyard. I'd planted 3 aspens back there the first summer, and they were finally getting some decent height. My daughter Emma, who was 12, had helped me build a small raised garden bed against the back fence. Everything about this property reflected the work and care I'd put into it. The deck wasn't just some structure to me, it was where Emma and I had breakfast on summer mornings, where I'd taught her to play chess, where we'd watched meteor showers wrapped in blankets. The idea that Patricia thought she could just roll up and demand I tear it down filled me with a cold anger. Sunday passed quietly. Emma was with her mother that weekend, so I used the time to research HOA law in Colorado. What I found was interesting. HOAs had significant power, but that power wasn't unlimited. They couldn't violate state or local building codes, and they couldn't supersede official determinations made by municipal authorities. As the director of the department that issued building permits and conducted safety inspections, my official assessment of my own structure would carry legal weight. Of course, there was an obvious conflict of interest there, which is why I'd asked Tom to do the inspection. Tom had 20 years of experience and was licensed by the state. His word was beyond reproach. Monday morning, Tom showed up at my house at 8, and I took him out to the deck before heading to the office. He spent about 30 minutes examining everything, taking photos, making notes on his tablet. "It's cosmetic damage with minor structural impact to one corner section," he said finally. "Repairs are straightforward. The deck is safe for use even as is, though I'd recommend not putting heavy furniture on this corner until it's fixed. I'll file the inspection report today." "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it." "No problem. Though I have to say, Rich, this is the weirdest inspection I've done. Your HOA lady must be something else. You have no idea." I got to my office at 9 and dove into the usual Monday chaos. 3 developers wanting to discuss proposed projects, 2 homeowners contesting violation notices, and a city council member who wanted to talk about expediting permits for a new community center. I didn't leave my desk until almost 7 that evening. When I got home, there was a notice taped to my front door, official HOA letterhead signed by Patricia Henderson. It informed me that since 48 hours had now passed, the HOA was exercising its right to contract for the removal of my deck. Work would begin Thursday morning at 8. The cost would be added to my HOA account, with late fees accruing if not paid within 30 days. I read it twice, heat rising in my chest. She hadn't even waited the full 48 hours. Her first notice had been Saturday at 7 in the morning. This notice was dated Monday at 5 in the afternoon. That was about 58 hours, but she'd started the clock before I'd even been awake enough to process her first visit. I called Marcus, my lawyer, but got voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and asking him to call me as soon as he got back. Then I drafted an email to Patricia, attaching Tom's inspection report and Steve's repair estimate. Miss Henderson, I wrote, as you can see from the attached documents, my deck has been inspected by a licensed city inspector and determined to be structurally sound with only cosmetic repairs required. Those repairs will begin this Wednesday. Your notice regarding removal is premature and unnecessary. The structure is not beyond repair, and I will be exercising my right as a homeowner to repair rather than remove it. I sent it at 7:30 and got a reply within 15 minutes. Mr. Olsen, the Architectural Review Committee has already made its determination. Your inspection is irrelevant to HOA bylaws. Removal will proceed as scheduled. I sat back in my desk chair, staring at that email. The casual dismissal of an official city inspection was breathtaking in its arrogance. Patricia either didn't understand the legal framework she was operating under, or she didn't care. Tuesday morning, I was in early reviewing permits for a new apartment complex on the east side when my assistant, Jennifer, knocked on my door. Rich, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Patricia Henderson, I looked up, surprised. Send her in. Patricia walked into my office like she owned it, carrying the same clipboard from Saturday. She was wearing a different blazer, navy this time, but the same expression of stern determination. Mr. Olsen, I think we got off on the wrong foot, she began, sitting down without being invited. I wanted to come here personally to explain the situation. I'm listening. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA has certain standards we're obligated to maintain. Property values depend on it. When homeowners let structures fall into disrepair, it affects the entire community. I'm sure you understand that, given your position. What I understand, I said carefully, is that a licensed inspector has determined my deck is structurally sound and requires only minor repairs, which are scheduled to begin tomorrow. There is no legal basis for removal. Patricia set her clipboard on my desk. The HOA covenants give us authority over all external structures. Homeowners agreed to those covenants when they purchased their property. You agreed to them. I did. But HOA covenants can't supersede municipal building codes or official safety inspections. If a city inspector says a structure is safe and repairable, that's the final word. She leaned forward slightly. Are you threatening to use your official position to override HOA authority? I'm explaining the legal hierarchy. HOAs operate at the pleasure of state and local law. They don't supersede it, I see. Patricia stood up, smoothing her blazer. Then I suppose we'll let the courts decide. The HOA has excellent legal representation. We're prepared to pursue this matter fully. After she left, I sat there for a long moment, processing the implied threat. She was talking about a lawsuit, which meant lawyers, court dates, and potentially thousands of dollars in legal fees. Most homeowners, faced with that prospect, would back down. The HOA knew it and counted on it. But I wasn't most homeowners, and I wasn't going to be bullied. Marcus finally called me back Tuesday afternoon. I explained everything that had happened, forwarded him the emails and notices, and sent him copies of Tom's inspection report and Steve's estimate. This is pretty straightforward, Marcus said after reviewing everything. The HOA is overstepping. I'll draft a cease and desist letter, citing the inspection report and relevant Colorado statutes. Should be enough to back them off. And if it's not, then we file an injunction. But it won't come to that. Once they realize you're serious and have documentation, they'll drop it. HOAs are only tough when they think they can intimidate people. The cease and desist letter went out Wednesday morning via email and certified mail. Steve showed up at 9 with his crew, and they started tearing out the damaged sections of my deck. I took the day off work to supervise and, honestly, to make sure nobody from the HOA tried anything stupid. By noon, the damaged boards were removed, and Steve's crew was starting to frame the new corner section. The damaged railings came off easy enough, and Steve had ordered replacements that matched the existing style perfectly. It was satisfying, watching the repairs take shape, seeing the deck return to its original condition. At 1 in the afternoon, Patricia showed up with 2 men in coveralls and a pickup truck that said Henderson Demolition and Hauling on the side. I walked over to meet them at the gate to my backyard. "Can I help you?" "We're here to remove the deck," one of the men said. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between Patricia and me. "No, you're not. This deck is being repaired, as you can see. There's no removal happening." Patricia stepped forward. "Mr. Olsen, you were given proper notice. This is proceeding as scheduled." I pulled out my phone and opened my email. "Miss Henderson, you were served this morning with a cease and desist letter from my attorney. Any attempt to demolish or interfere with my property will result in immediate legal action, including criminal charges for trespassing and destruction of property." One of the demolition guys held up his hands. "Hey, lady, you didn't say anything about a legal situation. We're out." "You're under contract," Patricia snapped. "Not for this. Come on, Jimmy." They got back in their truck and drove off, leaving Patricia standing on my driveway, her face flushed with anger. "This isn't over," she said. "Actually, it is, unless you want to get sued for harassment. My deck is being legally repaired under proper supervision. You have no authority here." She left without another word, and Steve, who'd been watching from the deck, let out a low whistle. "Man, she really doesn't like backing down, does she? Some people confuse stubbornness with strength." The repairs were finished by Friday afternoon. The deck looked perfect, maybe even better than before. Steve had made some subtle improvements, reinforcing a couple of joints that had been showing wear, and the new boards were pressure-treated lumber that would last decades. I paid him cash with a generous tip for dealing with the drama. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The following Monday, I got a call at my office from the county attorney's office. A woman named Sarah Chen introduced herself and asked if I had a few minutes to discuss a formal complaint filed against me. "What kind of complaint?" "A Patricia Henderson, representing the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, has filed an ethics complaint alleging that you abused your position as Director of Building Permits to circumvent proper HOA authority. She's claiming conflict of interest and demanding an independent investigation." I closed my eyes, fighting back frustration. "Miss Chen, I'm happy to discuss this. Do you want me to come to your office? That would be helpful. How's this afternoon at 2? I'll be there." I spent my lunch hour preparing documentation. Tom's inspection report, which clearly showed he'd conducted it, not me. Steve's repair estimate and invoice. Photos of the deck before, during, and after repairs. The HOA covenants. The cease and desist letter. I put it all in a folder and drove over to the county attorney's office at 1:30. Sarah Chen was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that assessed me carefully as I sat down. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Olsen. I want to be clear that this is a preliminary meeting. No formal investigation has been opened yet. I'm just gathering information." "I understand. Walk me through what happened." I did, starting with Patricia's first visit and going through everything chronologically. Sarah took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, I handed her the folder of documentation. She reviewed it carefully, taking her time. After about 15 minutes, she looked up. "You had another inspector conduct the official assessment, not yourself." "Correct. Tom Richards, one of my senior staff, licensed and experienced. I recused myself from any official capacity." "And the repairs were done by a licensed contractor?" "Yes, Steve Morrison. His license is current and in good standing." Sarah tapped her pen against her notepad. "Mr. Olsen, between you and me, this complaint appears to be retaliation." Miss Henderson came in here quite upset, making accusations about abuse of power. "But from what I'm seeing, you followed proper procedure. You didn't use your position improperly. You used the same process any homeowner would use, with the same inspectors and contractors available to the public." "That's correct. I'm going to recommend that this complaint be dismissed without investigation. However, I do need to advise you that Miss Henderson seemed quite determined. She may escalate this further." "To where?" "I've got nothing to hide." Some people don't let facts get in the way of their crusades. Just be aware. I left the county attorney's office feeling vindicated but uneasy. Sarah was right. Patricia had the look of someone who wouldn't let this go. I'd seen that type before in my work. Usually developers or homeowners who felt the rules shouldn't apply to them, who escalated and escalated until they finally hit a wall they couldn't push through. The next escalation came 2 weeks later. I got a notice in the mail that the Meadowbrook Heights HOA was calling a special meeting to discuss ongoing violations by a homeowner in willful disregard of community standards. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 at the community clubhouse. Homeowners were encouraged to attend. Emma was with me that week, and I had to arrange for her to stay with my sister so I could go to this meeting. She asked why I had to go if I didn't want to, and I tried to explain about HOAs and community responsibilities, but she just looked confused. "So people who don't own your house get to tell you what to do with it?" "Sort of, yeah. That's stupid." Hard to argue with 12-year-old logic. The clubhouse was more crowded than I expected when I arrived Thursday evening. Maybe 50 people, mostly homeowners I recognized from around the neighborhood. Patricia stood at the front with 2 other people, a man in his 60s with a silver beard, and a woman about Patricia's age wearing expensive-looking glasses. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight we're addressing a serious issue that affects our entire community. One of our homeowners has chosen to ignore HOA authority and create a precedent that, if left unchallenged, could undermine everything we've built here." She launched into a presentation, complete with photos on a projection screen. Pictures of my deck when it was damaged, making it look worse than it actually was. Claims about declining property values. Allegations that I'd used my professional position to bully the HOA. "This isn't about one deck," Patricia said, her voice rising with passion. "This is about whether we as a community have the right to maintain our standards. If Mr. Olsen can simply ignore our rules because of his job title, what's to stop other homeowners from doing the same? Where does it end?" She opened the floor to questions, clearly expecting support. What she got was more mixed than she anticipated. A man named George from 3 houses down stood up. "Didn't he get the deck inspected and repaired properly? I walked past last week. Looks fine to me." "The issue isn't how it looks," Patricia said. "The issue is the process. Mr. Olsen ignored the Architectural Review Committee's decision." A woman named Linda spoke up. "But didn't the committee say he had to tear down the whole deck? That seems extreme." "My fence got damaged in that same storm and you let me repair it." "That was different. Your fence wasn't a structural element." A deck isn't structural to the house, I said, unable to stay quiet any longer. It's an accessory structure, and for the record, I didn't ignore your committee. I followed the exact same process any homeowner would follow. I got it inspected by a licensed city inspector, got an estimate from a licensed contractor, and had it repaired to code. The only difference is that I knew enough not to be intimidated into unnecessarily demolishing and rebuilding something that could be easily fixed. Patricia's face flushed. "You're out of order, Mr. Olsen. This isn't your time to speak." "Actually," the silver-bearded man next to her said quietly, "he has the right to respond to accusations. That's basic fairness, Patricia." She shot him a look that could have frozen water but nodded tersely. "Fine, make your statement." I stood up so everyone could see me. "I'm Richard Olsen. I've lived here for 3 years. I've paid my HOA dues on time, kept my property maintained, and followed the community rules. When my deck was damaged in the February snowstorm, I did exactly what anyone should do. I got it inspected and repaired." The HOA president decided that wasn't good enough and demanded I demolish the entire structure, which would have cost me $15,000 instead of the $1,500 it cost to repair. When I refused to waste that money on unnecessary demolition, she tried to have it torn down without my consent. That's when I got my attorney involved. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Several people looked surprised, others nodded. "The inspection report is public record," I continued. "The deck was structurally sound. The repairs were minor. Any claims to the contrary are simply false. I'm happy to show anyone the documentation." George spoke up again. "So let me get this straight, Patricia. You wanted him to tear down a perfectly good deck and build a new one, costing him thousands of dollars, when it could be fixed for less than $2,000. The Architectural Review Committee determined that removal was necessary to maintain community standards." "Who's on this committee?" Linda asked. The woman with the expensive glasses raised her hand. "I am. Susan Fitzgerald and Patricia, and Todd here." She gestured to the silver-bearded man. "And did all 3 of you agree that the deck had to be removed?" George pressed. Susan and Todd exchanged glances. Todd cleared his throat. "Actually, it was Patricia's determination. She brought photos to our meeting and said removal was necessary. We deferred to her judgment." "Did you actually go look at the deck in person?" Linda asked. Silence. "That's what I thought," Linda said. "This whole thing sounds like a power trip." The meeting deteriorated from there. Patricia tried to regain control, but more and more homeowners were asking questions, expressing doubts, sharing their own stories of Patricia being unreasonable about various issues. A man named Carlos mentioned that Patricia had threatened to fine him because his mailbox was 4 inches closer to the street than the HOA specifications allowed. Someone else said Patricia had demanded she repaint her front door because the shade of red was 1 degree off the approved color chart. By 8:30, it was clear the meeting wasn't going the way Patricia had planned. She adjourned abruptly, gathering her materials with sharp, angry movements. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to me, apologizing for the harassment, saying they'd had no idea Patricia was causing trouble. George invited me to a neighborhood barbecue the following weekend. Linda asked if I'd be willing to run for the HOA board in the next election. "I'm not really a joiner," I said. "Maybe you should be. Someone needs to keep her in check." I drove home feeling better than I had in weeks. It seemed like public opinion was on my side, and Patricia's attempt to turn the community against me had backfired. But Patricia wasn't done. Not even close. The following Tuesday, I was working late at the office, reviewing plans for a new shopping center when my phone rang. It was Marcus, my lawyer. "Rich, we've got a problem." "What now?" "The HOA is suing you. I just got served with the complaint. They're alleging breach of covenant, claiming $40,000 in damages, and seeking an injunction requiring you to remove the deck. I set down my pen slowly. $40,000? For what? They're claiming that your refusal to follow their directives has caused property values to decline and created legal expenses. It's mostly garbage, but it's going to cost money to defend. How much? Could be $5,000 to $10,000 if it goes to court. I can try to get it dismissed early, but that's not guaranteed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This was insane. All because I'd repaired my deck instead of demolishing it. Marcus, what are our options? We defend and file a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. Between you and me, I think the HOA's case is weak. No judge is going to award damages based on a properly repaired deck, but Patricia seems willing to throw money at this. The HOA's money, you mean? She's spending the entire community's funds on a personal vendetta. Exactly. Which might be worth pointing out to the other homeowners. That gave me an idea. The next day, I drafted a letter to all the homeowners in Meadowbrook Heights. I kept it factual and professional, outlining the situation, explaining that the HOA was now spending community funds on a lawsuit over a legally repaired deck, and suggesting that concerned homeowners might want to attend the next regular board meeting to ask questions about how their dues were being spent. I printed 200 copies and spent Saturday morning delivering them to every mailbox in the neighborhood. Sunday afternoon, my phone started ringing. First George, then Linda, then a dozen other neighbors. They were furious. Most of them hadn't known about the lawsuit and were appalled that their HOA dues were being used this way. We need to call a vote to remove Patricia from the board, Linda said. This has gone too far. Can you do that? The bylaws allow for a recall election if 15% of homeowners petition for it. I'm already making calls. By Monday evening, Linda had her signatures. By Tuesday, the recall election was officially scheduled for the following month. Patricia called me Wednesday morning. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. You're trying to turn the community against me. I informed the community about how their money was being spent. That's transparency, not sabotage. You'll lose this lawsuit, and when you do, everyone will see that I was right all along. Patricia, I repaired my deck. That's all I did. You've turned it into a war, and for what? What are you actually trying to accomplish here? There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, almost vulnerable. I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I've kept this community safe, maintained property values, enforced standards, and people like you come in and think you can just ignore the rules because they're inconvenient. I didn't ignore any rules. I followed the law. The law isn't enough. The law is the minimum. We're supposed to be better than that here. Better than the law. Another pause. You wouldn't understand. She hung up. I sat there for a while thinking about that conversation. There was something almost sad in Patricia's voice at the end. A hint of someone who'd wrapped their entire identity up in being the guardian of community standards, and couldn't back down now without admitting that maybe, just maybe, they'd gone too far. The lawsuit crawled forward through March and into April. Depositions were scheduled, documents were exchanged, and my legal bills climbed steadily. Marcus was good, though, and he methodically dismantled the HOA's case piece by piece. He deposed Patricia, who couldn't provide any evidence of declining property values. He deposed Susan and Todd, who admitted they'd never actually inspected my deck and had deferred to Patricia's judgment. He submitted Tom's inspection report, Steve's invoice, and photos showing the completed repairs. The HOA's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Frank Peterson, seemed increasingly aware that his client had no case. At a hearing in late April, he tried to negotiate a settlement where I'd pay $5,000 to the HOA and the suit would be dropped. "Absolutely not," I said. "I'm not paying them a dime." "Rich," Marcus said quietly, $5,000 is less than this will cost to take to trial." "I don't care, it's the principle. They're wrong and I'm not rewarding them for being wrong," Frank overheard and sighed. "Mr. Olsen, my client is very committed to this case." "So am I." The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Ortega, looked over her glasses at all of us. "Gentlemen, I've reviewed the filings. Mr. Peterson, I'm inclined to grant summary judgment for the defendant unless you can show me evidence of actual damages." "Do you have any?" Frank shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, the damages are reputational and communal in nature." "That's not evidence. That's speculation. I'm giving you 2 weeks to submit concrete evidence of damages, or this case is dismissed with prejudice. And Mr. Peterson, you might want to have a serious conversation with your client about wasting the court's time." We left the courthouse, and Marcus was grinning. "That went about as well as it could have. She's going to dismiss this. Good. Though I have to tell you, Frank pulled me aside before we left. He says Patricia is talking about appealing if she loses, dragging this out even further." "Can she do that?" "Technically, yes. Practically, she'd be throwing good money after bad. Most HOA boards would fire her rather than keep funding a losing battle. That's what the recall election was supposed to be about." It was scheduled for the second Saturday in May, with voting at the community clubhouse from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I voted at 9:15, right after they opened. The ballot was simple. Should Patricia Henderson be removed from her position as HOA board president? Yes or no? I checked yes, dropped my ballot in the box, and went home to do yard work. Emma was with me that weekend, and we spent the afternoon planting flowers in her garden bed and repainting the fence along the back property line. She'd developed an interest in gardening over the past year, and I loved watching her carefully space out the marigolds and petunias, checking her phone for the proper depth to plant each one. "Is this about the deck thing?" she asked as we worked. "No, this is about flowers." "You know what I mean, Dad, the voting thing." "Yeah, it's related. The lady who was causing problems might get removed from being in charge." "Good. She sounds mean." At 3 o'clock, Linda called. 72% voted yes, Patricia's out. "There's an emergency board meeting tonight at 7 to elect a new president." "That's great news. We want you to be on the board, Rich. Will you accept a nomination?" I thought about it. I told Linda before that I wasn't a joiner, and that was true. But this community was my home and Emma's home when she stayed with me. Maybe it was worth being involved, making sure the HOA actually served the homeowners instead of ruling over them. "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." That evening, I attended my first HOA board meeting. Susan and Todd were there, looking relieved. Patricia was not. The room was packed with homeowners who wanted to see the transition. George was elected as the new president. Linda became vice president. I was voted in as a board member along with 2 other neighbors, Carlos and a retired teacher named Margaret. Our first order of business was to review the lawsuit against me. "This needs to be dropped immediately," George said. "Frank Peterson told me it's costing us about $3,000 a month in legal fees. That's money we could be using to fix the playground equipment or repave the entrance road." The vote was unanimous. The lawsuit was withdrawn the next day. Judge Ortega wasn't amused. When Frank filed the withdrawal, she issued a written order criticizing the HOA for bringing a frivolous case and awarding me attorney's fees. Marcus submitted a bill for $8,000, which the HOA was ordered to pay within 30 days. That should have been the end of the story. Patricia was out, the lawsuit was over, my deck was repaired, and everything was back to normal. But one evening in early June, I got a call from Steve, my contractor friend. "Rich, something weird happened." I got a call from the city inspector's office saying there's a complaint about unpermitted work at your address. What? The deck was permitted. I pulled the permit myself when I built it 5 years ago. That's what I told them. But they're saying someone filed a complaint alleging that the repairs were done without a permit. They want to send an inspector out. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Repairs under a certain dollar amount don't require new permits if they're just restoring the original structure. This falls under that exemption. I know that, and you know that. But someone filed a complaint, and now it's got to be investigated. The inspector came out 2 days later. Not Tom, who'd done the original assessment, but a newer guy named Brian, who I didn't know as well. He examined the deck thoroughly, reviewed the documentation, and confirmed what I already knew: the repairs were properly done and didn't require a new permit. "Who filed the complaint?" I asked. Brian consulted his tablet. "It was anonymous, called into the hotline. Do you have a recording?" "We might. I can check." 2 days later, Brian called me back. "Rich, I pulled the recording. It's a woman's voice. She claims to be a concerned neighbor who noticed unpermitted construction. But here's the thing: she specifically mentions that the work was done in defiance of HOA orders. That's a weird thing for a random neighbor to know about. Can I get a copy of that recording?" I shouldn't, but given the circumstances, yeah. "I'll email it to you." I listened to the recording 3 times. The voice was distorted, like the caller had put something over the phone, but the cadence and phrasing sounded familiar. I couldn't prove it, but I was 90% sure it was Patricia. I brought it up at the next board meeting. George listened to the recording and nodded slowly. "That sounds like her. She's trying to keep causing problems even though she's off the board." "Can we do anything about it?" Carlos asked. "File a harassment complaint with the police, maybe," Margaret suggested. "This is getting out of hand." I didn't want to go that route yet. It felt like escalation for the sake of escalation. Instead, I drafted a letter to Patricia, carefully worded with Marcus's help, informing her that any further harassment would result in legal action, including restraining orders and civil suits for damages. The letter was delivered by certified mail. Patricia signed for it on June 15th. For 2 weeks, there was silence. I started to think maybe, finally, this was over. Then on a Tuesday morning, I got to work and found my office in chaos. Jennifer was on the phone, looking stressed, and 3 people were waiting in the lobby looking angry. "What's going on?" Jennifer covered the phone. "Someone sent an anonymous complaint to the mayor's office and the city council alleging that you've been approving permits for friends and family without proper review, and that you approved your own deck repairs in violation of ethics rules." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not true, any of it." "I know that, but now there's going to be an investigation. The mayor's chief of staff wants to see you at 2 this afternoon." I spent the morning pulling together every document related to my deck: Tom's inspection, Steve's work, everything. I also pulled records showing my recusal from any official decision-making regarding my own property. By the time I walked into the mayor's office at 2, I had a 3-inch binder of documentation. The chief of staff, a sharp-eyed woman named Dorothy Kendrick, listened to my explanation and reviewed the documents. After an hour, she leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Olsen, between you and me, this looks like a malicious complaint, but given your position, we have to take it seriously. I'm recommending that the city manager assign an independent investigator to review your department's procedures over the past 3 years, just to ensure everything is above board." I understand. I have nothing to hide. I believe you. But politically, we need to be seen taking this seriously. You'll be placed on paid administrative leave during the investigation. That hit harder than I expected. For how long? Probably 6 to 8 weeks. I'm sorry, Rich. I know this is unfair, but it's the position we're in. I drove home in a daze. Paid leave sounded good in theory, but I loved my job. I'd built that department over 8 years, established procedures, hired good people. Being forced to step away felt like punishment for something I hadn't done. That evening, I called Marcus again. I think Patricia filed a false complaint against me with the city. Can we prove it? Do you have evidence? The timing is suspicious. The phrasing is similar to other things she said, but no, nothing concrete. Then we can't prove it, and Rich, filing a false government complaint is a crime. If we're going to go down that road, we need to be absolutely sure. Over the next week, the investigation into my department began. An independent auditor came in and started reviewing files, interviewing staff, checking procedures. It was humiliating, watching someone dissect my work looking for problems that didn't exist. Emma noticed something was wrong when I picked her up from school on Friday. "You're home early." "They gave me some time off work." "Did you get fired?" "No, sweetheart, just some administrative stuff." "It'll be fine." But I wasn't sure it would be fine. Even if the investigation cleared me completely, the allegation would hang over my career. People would wonder if there was any truth to it. I spent the weekend spiraling into frustration and anger. Patricia had taken a simple property dispute and turned it into an attack on my livelihood. The deck was long since repaired. The lawsuit was over. The board had moved on, but she couldn't let it go. Monday morning, I decided I needed to confront her directly. I drove to her house, a large colonial on the north side of the neighborhood, and rang the doorbell. She answered wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt, clearly not expecting visitors. When she saw it was me, her expression hardened. "What do you want?" "Did you file a complaint about me with the mayor's office?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Patricia, this has to stop. You lost. The deck is fixed, the lawsuit is dropped, you're off the board." "Why are you still doing this?" "I'm not doing anything. Now get off my property." "If you filed a false government complaint, that's a crime. You could go to jail." Something flickered in her eyes. "Fear, maybe. You can't prove anything." "Actually, I think I can, and I'm going to." I left before she could respond. I was bluffing about proof, but her reaction told me I was right. She'd filed that complaint. Back home, I called Brian, the inspector who'd handled the anonymous complaint about my deck. "Brian, do you remember that anonymous call about my deck? Did you ever get a phone number from the caller ID?" "Anonymous calls come through a general hotline. But hold on, let me check something." I heard him typing. "Yeah, actually, we do log the originating number even for anonymous calls. It's for internal tracking. Let me pull it up." He gave me the number. I didn't recognize it, but I called Marcus and asked him to run it through a reverse lookup. An hour later, Marcus called back. "It's a cell phone registered to Henderson Demolition and Hauling." My heart started pounding. Patricia's family business. Exactly. And Rich, if she used a company phone to file a false complaint, that's evidence. Real, tangible evidence. What do we do with it? We take it to the police. I met with a detective at the Denver Police Department that Tuesday. Detective Sarah Morrison listened to my entire story, reviewed all the documentation, and looked at the phone records Marcus had pulled together. "This is really a civil dispute," she said finally. "I'm not sure there's enough here for criminal charges." She filed a false complaint about unpermitted work. She filed false allegations with the mayor's office about ethics violations. Both of those are crimes. Can you prove the allegations were false, or just that they didn't pan out? That was the problem. In both cases, Patricia had alleged things that required investigation to disprove. She could claim she genuinely believed I'd done something wrong, and it would be nearly impossible to prove she knowingly lied. What about harassment? I asked. File for a restraining order through civil court. If she violates it, then we can get involved. I left the police station feeling defeated. Patricia was smart enough to stay just on the edge of legality, causing maximum damage while keeping herself protected. The independent investigation into my department wrapped up in late July. The investigator, a retired city manager named Harold Kim, called me to his temporary office to discuss his findings. Mr. Olsen, I've reviewed 3 years of permit applications, inspections, and decisions. I've interviewed your entire staff and multiple contractors who work with your department. I found no evidence of impropriety, favoritism, or ethics violations. Your recusal on matters involving your own property was properly documented. The inspection of your deck was conducted by a qualified inspector without your involvement in the official determination. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So I'm cleared, completely. I'm recommending to the city manager that you be reinstated immediately. I'm also noting in my report that the complaint appears to have been malicious and without merit. That will be part of the public record. I went back to work the following Monday, greeted by applause from my staff. Jennifer had hung a banner that said, "Welcome back," and someone had brought donuts. It was embarrassing and touching at the same time, but the damage was done. The local newspaper had run a story about the investigation, and even though the follow-up article cleared me completely, I knew some people would always wonder. That's how these things worked. At home that evening, I sat on my deck with a beer, looking out at Emma's garden. The flowers were in full bloom, bright splashes of color against the green grass. The deck boards were solid under my feet, the railings sturdy and properly sealed. Everything was exactly as it should be. My phone rang. It was George from the HOA. "Rich, I thought you should know. Patricia put her house up for sale. The listing went active this morning. She's leaving, looks like it. Linda talked to the real estate agent. Apparently Patricia is moving to Arizona to be near her daughter." I should have felt relief or vindication, but mostly I just felt tired. Good for her, I guess. The neighborhood won't miss her. Anyway, I wanted to give you a heads up. After we hung up, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. A simple snowstorm, a damaged deck, and an HOA president who couldn't let go of control. It had spiraled into lawsuits, investigations, and more stress than any home repair should ever cause. But sitting there on that deck, beer in hand, garden blooming in front of me, I realized something. Patricia hadn't won. She'd thrown everything she had at me, and I was still here. The deck was still here. My job was intact. My reputation was cleared. Emma came out and sat next to me. "Dad, can we have dinner out here tonight?" "Sure, kiddo. What do you want?" "Pizza." "Pizza it is." We ate pizza on the deck as the sun set, talking about her summer camp and the book she was reading and whether we should plant tomatoes next year. Normal, everyday conversation. The kind of thing I'd built this deck for in the first place. 2 weeks later, I saw the moving truck at Patricia's house. I was tempted to drive by to see her one last time, maybe even to say something. But what would be the point? She was leaving, taking her need for control and rigid enforcement of rules to some other community. I almost felt sorry for her future neighbors. The HOA under George's leadership was different. More reasonable, more focused on actual community needs rather than nitpicking violations. We repaved the main entrance road, updated the playground equipment, and organized a neighborhood block party in August. People who'd been intimidated by Patricia's version of the HOA started participating again, volunteering for committees, actually enjoying being part of the community. In September, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the postmark was from Phoenix, Arizona. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words written in neat handwriting: "You win." I stared at that note for a long time, trying to figure out what I felt: anger, satisfaction, relief. Finally, I folded it up and threw it in the recycling bin. It wasn't about winning or losing. It never had been. That Saturday, Steve came over to help me build a pergola off the side of the deck. Emma wanted somewhere shady to read during the summer, and I'd been planning this project for months. We'd pulled the proper permits, submitted plans to the HOA Architectural Review Committee, and gotten approval without any drama. As we worked, Steve asked, "You hear Patricia moved away?" "Yeah. Good riddance. That woman caused more problems than she solved. You know, she tried to fine me once because my work truck was parked on the street during a job. Said commercial vehicles weren't allowed in the neighborhood." "What did you do?" "Told her to read the county ordinances, which specifically allow contractors to park while working on a property." She backed down, but she wasn't happy about it. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, measuring and cutting lumber, drilling pilot holes, making sure everything was level and square. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and I could hear Emma in the backyard playing with our dog, a golden retriever named Chester that I'd adopted for her last Christmas. By evening, the pergola frame was up. It still needed the cross beams and finishing work, but the structure was there, solid and strong. Emma came to inspect it, walking underneath and looking up at the sky through the beams. "It's like a skeleton," she said. "It'll look better once we're done. Want to help me stain it next weekend?" "Can I pick the color?" "Within reason." She grinned and ran off to look up pergola stains on her phone. Steve packed up his tools and declined my offer of a beer. "Got another job early tomorrow. But hey, Rich, I'm glad everything worked out. You got a raw deal with that HOA situation." "It's over now." "Is it though? I mean, are you really okay? That was a lot of stress." I thought about it. "Yeah, I am. It sucked at the time, but it taught me something. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when it's expensive and stressful and you'd rather just give in. Because if you don't, they'll keep doing it to the next person." Steve nodded. "Truth. All right, man, see you next week." After he left, I sat on the deck steps with Chester, scratching behind his ears while he panted happily. The pergola frame cast interesting shadows across the yard as the sun set. In a few weeks, it would be finished, and Emma and I could hang string lights and maybe some plants in hanging baskets. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the county attorney's office, Sarah Chen. The subject line said, "Henderson Investigation Update." I opened it, curious. "Mr. Olsen," the email read, "I wanted to inform you that our office has completed a review of the complaint filed against you by Miss Henderson. Based on our investigation and the findings of the independent audit, we have determined that Miss Henderson knowingly filed false allegations. While she has since relocated out of state, we are forwarding our findings to the Arizona Attorney General's office for potential prosecution. Additionally, we are banning her from filing any further complaints against Denver County employees for a period of 5 years. Thank you for your patience during this process." I read it twice, then set my phone down. So there would be consequences after all, even if Patricia was in another state. That felt like justice, though not the dramatic courtroom kind. Just the slow, methodical process of the system catching up to someone who'd abused it. The next few months passed quietly. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the changing leaves on my 3 aspens. Emma and I finished the pergola together, staining it a warm cedar color she'd picked out, and I hung string lights that made the space feel magical in the evenings. We spent October nights out there, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars and talking about everything and nothing. The HOA continued to function smoothly under George's leadership. We had our quarterly meetings, discussed maintenance issues, approved reasonable requests from homeowners, and generally acted like what an HOA should be: a group of neighbors working together to maintain a community, not an enforcement agency looking for violations. In November, a new family moved into Patricia's old house. They had 3 kids, and within a week, the house went from sterile perfection to lived in chaos, with bikes in the driveway, chalk drawings on the sidewalk, and a basketball hoop over the garage. It was exactly what the neighborhood needed. I was doing yard work one Saturday when the new neighbor, a guy about my age named Peter, came over to introduce himself. "Hey, I'm Peter, just moved in from Boulder." We shook hands. "Rich, welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks." "Hey, weird question." The real estate agent mentioned something about the previous owner having issues with an HOA. "Should I be worried?" I smiled. The previous owner was the HOA president, and she had some control issues. It's been resolved. New board, much more reasonable. That's a relief. My wife was nervous about moving into an HOA community, but the house was perfect. "It's a good neighborhood. You'll like it here." As Peter walked back to his house, I realized I meant that. It was a good neighborhood, made better by Patricia's absence. Not because she was a bad person necessarily, but because she'd let her need for control poison what should have been a simple community organization. December brought the first major snow since the storm that had started this whole mess. I watched it accumulate on my deck, covering the boards and railings, and felt no anxiety. The structure was solid. The repairs were done right. If any damage occurred, I knew exactly how to handle it, and I had a community that would support rather than harass me. Emma and I spent Christmas week at the house, just the 2 of us. We decorated a tree on the deck, stringing lights and hanging ornaments from the pergola beams. It was probably against some rule somewhere, but nobody complained. We made hot chocolate and watched Christmas movies, wrapped presents, and enjoyed the quiet. On Christmas morning, after opening presents, Emma asked if we could walk around the neighborhood to look at decorations. We bundled up and headed out, Chester pulling excitedly on his leash. The neighborhood was beautiful. Houses decorated with lights and inflatable snowmen, wreaths on doors, and music drifting from various homes. As we walked past the house that used to be Patricia's, I saw Peter and his family building a snowman in the front yard. The kids were laughing, throwing snow at each other, while Peter and his wife worked on rolling a massive snowball for the base. It was chaotic and joyful, and everything a winter day should be. Emma tugged my hand. "Can we build a snowman when we get home?" "Absolutely." We spent the afternoon in our own yard, building a lopsided snowman that Chester immediately tried to knock over. Emma decorated it with a carrot nose and button eyes, and I found an old scarf to wrap around its neck. It was perfect in its imperfection, just like everything else about this house, this property, this life I'd built. That evening, sitting on my repaired deck with a cup of coffee, watching the snow fall gently in the backyard, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The damage, the conflict, the stress, the investigation. It had all felt overwhelming at the time, like it would never end. But here I was in my house on my deck, with my daughter asleep upstairs and my dog curled at my feet. Patricia was gone, her vendetta finished. The HOA was functioning properly. My job was secure. My reputation was intact. I'd stood my ground when someone tried to bully me into an unreasonable action, and I'd won not through aggression or retaliation, but through documentation, patience, and the simple truth. Sometimes that's all it takes, knowing you're right and being willing to prove it. The string lights on the pergola twinkled above me, and I thought about all the summer evenings ahead, teaching Emma new card games out here, reading books, watching meteor showers. The deck had been worth fighting for, not because it was expensive or important, but because it represented something larger: my right to make reasonable decisions about my own property, to fix rather than demolish, to stand up to unreasonable demands. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to the empty yard, the falling snow, and the peaceful quiet of a neighborhood finally free from unnecessary drama. Then I went inside, locked the door, and went to bed, confident that tomorrow would be just another normal day in my home, exactly as it should be. The story could have ended there, a simple tale of an HOA conflict resolved, but life rarely wraps up that neatly. In January, I got a call from a reporter named Michael Torres from a local news station. He'd heard about my situation with Patricia and wanted to do a story about HOA overreach. "I'm not interested in publicity," I told him. "I understand, but Mr. Olsen, there are thousands of people dealing with unreasonable HOAs all over Colorado. Your story could help them understand their rights." I thought about it. Maybe he was right. Maybe sharing what I'd learned could help someone else avoid the stress I'd gone through. "Okay," I said, "but I want to focus on the legal issues, not personal drama." The interview aired in early February, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first knocked on my door. Michael did a good job keeping it professional, focusing on HOA authority versus municipal law, the importance of documentation, and knowing your rights as a homeowner. The segment was only 6 minutes, but it generated a surprising response. My office phone rang for days afterward, with homeowners asking questions about permits, repairs, and how to deal with their own HOA conflicts. I fielded what I could and referred the rest to appropriate resources. It felt good, turning my experience into something useful for others. In March, the state legislature introduced a new bill aimed at clarifying HOA authority and preventing the kind of overreach Patricia had engaged in. I was asked to testify before a committee, sharing my experience and explaining how existing laws could be strengthened. The bill passed in April, adding new transparency requirements for HOA boards and establishing clearer guidelines for when HOAs could demand removal versus repair of structures. Emma was impressed that her dad had influenced state law. "So you basically made a new rule for everyone in Colorado?" "Not exactly. I just shared my experience, and smarter people than me wrote a better law." Still cool. She was right. It was cool. Something good had come from all that stress and conflict. By the time summer arrived again, the whole Patricia situation felt like ancient history. The neighborhood had moved on, the HOA was running smoothly, and my deck continued to serve its purpose beautifully. Emma and I added a small fire pit off to one side, and we started having regular Friday night dinners out there. Sometimes just us, sometimes with neighbors. George proved to be an excellent HOA president, and under his leadership, our community actually felt like a community rather than a collection of properties monitored for compliance. We organized a neighborhood cleanup day, started a community garden in a common area, and even got a little free library installed at the entrance to the subdivision. One evening in July, sitting on that deck with Emma, teaching her the constellations visible in Denver's light-polluted sky, she asked me if I'd ever heard from Patricia again. "No," I said, "and I don't expect to." "You think she ever realized she was wrong?" That was a harder question. "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe she still thinks she was right and I was just stubborn." You were stubborn, true, but sometimes stubborn is what you need to be. Emma nodded, processing that. When I'm older and have my own house, will I have to deal with an HOA? Maybe. Or maybe you'll choose a house without one. The point is, you'll know your rights and you'll know how to stand up for yourself if someone tries to push you around. Like you did. Like I did. We sat in comfortable silence after that, watching fireflies blink in the yard while Chester chased them ineffectively. The pergola lights cast a warm glow, and somewhere down the street, I could hear kids playing basketball, the rhythmic bounce of the ball on pavement. This was what I'd fought for, not just a deck, but the life that happened on and around it. The meals, the conversations, the quiet moments, the memories being made. Patricia had tried to take that away over bureaucratic power and rigid rules, but she'd failed. In the end, my deck stood exactly where it had always been, repaired and stronger than before. And I stood on it, confident in the knowledge that sometimes the right thing to do is simply refuse to back down when someone demands something unreasonable. The snow damage that started it all was long forgotten, buried under layers of new memories. The deck bore no scars from that winter storm, but I carried forward the lessons learned about standing firm, documenting everything, knowing the law, and the importance of community members holding their HOAs accountable. Patricia was somewhere in Arizona, probably finding new battles to fight, new rules to enforce. But here in Meadowbrook Heights, we were building something better, a neighborhood where people helped each other rather than policed each other, where common sense trumped rigid compliance, where a damaged deck could be simply and properly repaired without drama. As Emma headed inside to get ready for bed, I stayed out a few minutes longer, hand on the smooth railing Steve had installed, feeling the solid construction beneath my feet. Sometimes the things worth fighting for are small: a deck, a home, the right to make reasonable decisions about your own property. But small things have a way of mattering more than we expect. This deck had become a symbol of something larger, a line in the sand that said enough, no further. And that line had held. I went inside, locked up, and checked that Emma was settled for the night. Then I went to my own room, tired but content, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The HOA saga was over, transformed from a source of stress into a closed chapter, a story I could tell with perspective and maybe even some humor now that time had passed. Outside, the deck stood silent in the darkness, string lights twinkling above it, waiting for another day of use, another evening of conversation, another season of life. It would be there for years to come, solid and reliable, a testament to the simple power of doing things right and refusing to be bullied into doing them wrong. And really, that's all any of us can do: build something good, maintain it properly, and stand firm when someone tries to tear it down for no good reason. The deck had weathered one storm and survived another of a different kind. It would weather more in the years ahead, because that's what well-built things do. They endure.